Hi, my name's David Schuemann. I'm the owner and creative principal from CF Napa. Wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. We've got a great group. Really excited to have you all here and excited to be in front of you to talk about our subject today. We'd like to welcome you to the Wine Spirits Wholesalers of America's Access webinar, continuing the conversation, what goes into a label. This webinar is the first in the series of virtual programming created to take a deeper dive into some of the topics raised in last week's webinar, Labeled for Success. One thing I wanted to mention to the audience is we will be doing a Q&A session at the end. So if you have questions as I'm going through the material or when we get to the Q&A, be sure to put those questions into chat and I'll try to address as many of those as I can. If I don't get to your question, be sure to look me up, either give me a call or send me an email. We will be sending contact links after this so that you can get access to myself, and I'm happy to have a side conversation. Today, I'm going to be talking about, go over a little bit about myself to start with, and then we'll be talking about the 80-20 rule, why consumers drink with their eyes, the 3 benefits of exceptional packaging, and how to successfully navigate the creative process, and of course, how to choose your creative partner. So CF Napa has been based in the Napa Valley for about 45 years. We're a leader in alcoholic beverage branding, and we have a global roster of clients. We combine exceptional strategic insights with bespoke design. Our work consistently garners strong return on investment for our clients. We're far more than just a packaging firm. We do quite a bit of positioning work, brand development, and brand repositioning, story naming, logo development, custom glass, package design, then really anything to support a brand. So marketing, collateral, website design, etc. So enough about myself. Let's jump into the good stuff. I want to touch on a couple of myths that we come across quite a bit when talking to potential clients. And one that drives me a little crazy is this idea of a quality of product is everything. This idea that somehow make it and the consumer will buy it and they will come. And the second is packaging is the last step, kind of the least important. We hear sometimes from distillers, we've spent all our money on the still, the location, and the production equipment, and we don't have a lot of budget left over for the packaging. And so I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about why that's so important. So clearly consumers are surrounded by and influenced by a lot of things, point of sale and brand ambassadors, awards, mixologists. Quality of product for sure is important. I think it's kind of the benchmark to just even start. Publications, online, social media, tasting events, hopefully again soon, are all kind of surrounding the brand. But packaging's on the front lines of consumer choice. And it can't be removed. I mean, the consumer's reality, particularly at retail, and not everybody is completely in retail, but distribution. Think about this is they've got thousands of choices and it's overwhelming. So unlike most consumer touch points, like social media, like advertising, packaging is inseparable from your product. It's your 24-hour salesperson. So let's talk a little bit about the 80-20 rule. So consumers purchase alcohol brands based on the package. About 80% of what they make a decision is based off that package in front of them. And the 20% is all those other things, the advertising, the social media, the recommendations. So that's why we talk about consumers really do, in a lot of ways, drink with their eyes. They make a lot of decisions about what your product's going to taste like. Is it a quality product? Is it appropriate for the price point you're asking? How does it fit into their lifestyle? But bottom line, if it looks good, it will taste good. We've done some really interesting consumer testing where we've actually had consumers taste the same product in 3 different glasses in a focus group. And we've aligned those, though, however, with 3 different package designs. And it's fascinating to watch if a consumer likes the package, they really like the taste of the product. And I've watched that same consumer drink the next cup thinking it's a different product aligned with a package they didn't like and literally spit it back into the cup. Like that violent, that incredible amount of difference between their perception of what they tasted and smelled and when it was tied to a different kind of package design. So there's clearly, we know that our senses are all interconnected and they influence how we purchase things. And so I want you to consider how important that packaging is in the influence of not just the initial purchase decision, but down the road, how their experiences of your product even once they've purchased. And I'll talk about that a little bit next. The three benefits of exceptional packaging. So what is great packaging going to do for you? Well, one, it's going to invite trial, right? It's going to get your product to stand out on shelf. It's going to grab the consumer's attention online or social media or wherever they come across it. The average consumer has so little information when making a decision at retail. There's so hard to get point of sale purchase points put into stores. So really, again, grabbing their attention. Second, it reinforces quality. So like I was talking about, there's a confirmation bias that's built into all of us as humans. When consumers purchase a wine or spirit that's visually appealing to them, they perceive it as being higher in quality and taste. As humans, we actually subconsciously want it to taste better. We don't want to be wrong, right? We bought something, we think it's going to be great. So for in fact, a lot of times if a consumer loves the way your package looks, it actually will taste better to them. And the third thing that great packaging can do is assist recall. I think the most difficult thing for most consumers is to remember the drink or the product that a bartender recommended to them, or a wine that a som suggested them at a restaurant, the cocktail they had at a friend's house last weekend. What was that wine they bought at the store last week that they liked so much with their friends? So trying to create packaging that reinforces the name, brings the story forward, but creates something memorable for the consumer so that when they go back to look for it, it's easy for them to find on shelf, or it's easy for them to remember the name of. So let's talk a little bit about the creative process and really how to set that table for success. One of the things that we highly recommend is for you to work with a creative brief. And this goes for even if you're not going to work with a designer, even if you're just going to try to wing it on your own, I highly recommend you go through the process of writing a creative brief. And a matter of fact, we're going to follow up with some materials where we're actually going to tell you exactly how to write that brief. But let me just touch on a few things today. We ask a lot of we have about a 15-page creative brief we've developed over the last 40 years. It asks a lot of questions you might not expect to find in a creative brief. So things like that you pull from your business plan, like, are you going to have additional products that you're going to add to the line? Are you creating a house of brands or a branded house? A very important question to know ahead of time. What are kind of the aesthetic attributes of the brand? What's its brand personality? Are there certain colors that you lean towards? Where's that overlap between your kind of personal likes and the likes of what you think your core consumer is? Who is your core consumer? These are all super important questions. So getting that creative brief and using that then as kind of the benchmark for all the creative work that'll come afterwards. If you're going to work with a designer or an agency, then once you've got that, that's how you should judge the work moving forward, so that it's less of just purely a personal decision. If you're going to work with a designer or an agency, be sure you agree on a process. How is the work going to be presented? Are you going to be involved in the sketch stages? Are you going to be part of brainstorms? Or would you prefer it be more hands-off and have the agency work independently from you? You know, understanding kind of what that interrelationship is going to be, and really understand what the expectations for deliverables are. How many concepts are they going to show in the first presentation? What happens if you don't like the work? We actually have a guarantee with our work. If nothing changes with a creative brief, we'll do the work over for free. That's not a very common promise, but understanding what happens at that point, you know, will there be additional charges? Can you cancel the contract? Things like that they're important. And then of course, agree how the work will be judged and what success looks like. So again, creative brief is going to go a long ways to establishing that, but making sure also that they understand what the success looks like. Are there going to be different gatekeepers that come into the process later on? I think making sure that they're part of that briefing process and part of the creative brief, so that everyone's opinion's there and that you're not springing a decision maker late in the game on an agency, but also making sure that all the stakeholders are there just to share their thoughts originally, and then be there part of that first presentation. I want to talk a little bit then now about how to choose an agency. You can substitute just designer or freelancer in there. I use the word agency, but this will be applied to all of those. When you speak, when you're starting to, first of all, interview a number of different agencies, designers, maybe even a mixture of those if you're not sure what the right size is for you. Think about things like whether it's important for them to be local to you, or maybe you're working with someone that's even abroad outside the US or outside of your state or region. We work with clients globally. We probably have clients in at least 9 different countries. We work all across the United States. I think most agencies and most people these days are very used to working remotely, particularly after the last year we've had. But consider there are some advantages potentially to working with some locally, and there's also some negative things too. I think that sometimes going outside your region and someone that has a little bit more of a broader perspective on the market might be a real good opportunity for you versus working with someone that's just down the street. Also make sure that they're brand obsessed, not only about the category and alcoholic beverages, but also about your brand and about what you're embarking on. You want to feel their enthusiasm. Make sure that chemistry is there and that are they fun and friendly, or are they very serious and businesslike? What's the mix going to be? What's going to work for you? How do you like to communicate? Do they like to recap things in writing, but also have a lot of meetings by phone or in person? What's your work style, and making sure that you feel that chemistry, because you could be working with these folks for at least a few months and maybe even a few years. We've had clients with relationships that have stretched over a decade. And so, it's important to like the people you're going to work with. Make sure they're experts. This is something we come across quite a bit, where people are looking outside the category thinking they're going to get fresh ideas. And I always like to remind people that it's so important to make sure that they know alcoholic beverages, and not just for the TTB and regulations, but also just kind of the watch out pitfalls for things like cost of goods. Are they developing the brand packaging that you can actually afford to produce and still make a profit after you sell it? Capsules and labels can add up very quickly. Also making sure that you're not going to have bottling line issues down the road. Just this last year, we had a call from a client who actually, or not a client, but someone who's looking for help, who actually had done exactly opposite, had gone off and developed with a freelancer a custom bottle. Someone who didn't know the alcoholic beverage space, and she found herself in a place where she literally couldn't get anyone to put a label on it. She called us just for some advice, and I helped her out for free. We started looking at opportunities to see if we could find a label that could go on. Ultimately, the bottle was such a shape that we thought we could maybe put a shrink onto it. We worked with some experts on that. In the end, she was literally unable to put anything on this bottle. She had to take 25,000 bottles and junk them. So I hate to see any of you in that position. That's obviously an extreme story, but we get those kinds of calls fairly often at lesser extents. So making sure that you're working with folks that really know what they're doing. We believe that being 100% focused in alcoholic beverages, and agencies like that have done a lot of work in this space, are going to be your best options. Think about whether they've had cross-channel expertise. One of the things that's nice is with a lot of agencies is they do a lot of things besides just packaging. So doing things, making sure, can you build a relationship with them, with this designer agency? So after your packaging is done, they take care of some of your social media, or they develop your website design, or your tasting cards and your marketing materials. Also, when you're culling through the agencies, make sure that they can provide you with case studies and proven commercial success. I'm not talking about just pretty pictures. I'm talking about literally references from their clients. Even better if they can show you ROI with real dollars of what they brought to increase in sales, particularly if they reposition some of the brands. Those are kind of nice to look at, because obviously it was already outselling. Did they increase sales? Did they help a brand that was maybe struggling a little bit? So going through those and making sure that you get those from the agencies or designers you're thinking of. You're going to spend a lot of money to work with a designer, and you should make sure that you're going to get your investment back. So just to recap, as I'm going to go through a few of our pictures here, some of our portfolio, but just keep in mind that the 80-20 rule, thinking about how so much of what consumers use to make decisions when they go to purchase, either whether it's online or in person, is going to be really about the packaging. It's your 24-hour salesperson. Think about the fact that consumers really do, in a lot of ways, drink with their eyes. And what are the kind of flavor cues and the kind of quality cues they're going to get from your packaging? What's your story coming through on the package? Are you fun like Monkey in Paradise? Are you more kind of badass like Helmsman? And what are really, keep in mind those three benefits of successful packaging, what packaging can really do for you, how it can help your sales. Please think about putting together a budget for that when you're starting a business, if any of you are starting out. It's a really critical component. Our follow-up materials will include how to develop that budget and what's an appropriate amount for your size. Think about how to successfully navigate with your creative partners. Go through and really think about how you're going to cull through some of those agencies and designers, and ask good questions. And by all means, make sure you love working with them, you like them, they're good people. So at this point, I think I'd like to open up to some questions and answers. So I'm just going to stop the screen share here, and hopefully we've got some good questions coming here in the chat. So let's see here. We've got, here's one question from Alyssa. She's asking, what are some of the biggest differences between working with a freelancer versus working with an agency? I think one of the most interesting differences is that keep in mind that freelancers, while they're probably less expensive because they have less overhead, they're also a single person, and you're going to get just their perspective. When you work with an agency, you're going to get multiple designers, you're going to get a team's point of view. And I think that's, you get a broader perspective. You're going to pay for that. You're going to have a larger budget. But I think you get a very different kind of experience. Keep in mind also, freelancers get sick, they go on vacation. Agencies are open all the time. They will be there for years. We've been around for 45 years. We have every piece of mechanical artwork we ever did over that time. So we can always be gotten a hold of if there's an emergency. Here's another question. What are some trends you've seen in terms of specifics on the bottle? We hear QR codes are coming back. And anything else you think will be a norm in 5 to 10 years. QR codes, I thought they were gone. They are making a bit of a comeback. We have had some newer clients request them. I think the question to ask yourself with augmented reality or QR codes, to make sure that they're going to something that has some added value. I mean, simply going to a website is not enough. The better uses of QR codes that I've seen are for things like recipes, and I saw a fantastic use of augmented reality recently where you scanned the bottle and it actually opened up a website where there was a mixologist who made their top 3 cocktails in front of you step by step. So it was like a verbal recipe card, which I thought was really, really great. This one's from Nicole. In the creative process, how do you know when you're done or finished? It's a good question. I find, so we usually present somewhere between 3 to 5 concepts in our first creative presentation. We're very fortunate that most of our clients, their biggest challenge after that presentation is deciding between the designs that they love the most. It's usually a culling down to 1 or 2. We're maybe combining a logo or a different piece. From there, it's really, we do a few different things. We have the clients share it with some of their distribution partners if they are in retail, or we've even had some clients, when their tasting rooms are open, share it with some of their core consumers. Getting kind of some feedback that way can be kind of a down and dirty bootstrap way to get some feedback. We've obviously done hundreds of brands, and we have a very good way of kind of working with our clients to help them along that process, to feel comfortable with their decisions they've made. We often do shelf sets as well, just to look at it on shelf and how do you look compared to some of your competitors. Is your sharing it with some people that don't know the brand story and seeing what kind of attributes they think the package speaks to them, and making sure there's a connection. If there is, I think you're probably in a pretty good spot. Jake's got a question. Do you ever get compensated per bottle sold as opposed to a flat fee up front? The quick answer is yes. The long answer is not that often. We generally work on a flat fee basis. So we write a proposal for a flat fee that covers the amount of deliverables that we agree with our clients on. We have done several projects over the last 5 years where we did a couple of different ways. Bottles sold was one way. I kind of prefer kind of sales targets that we hit. And once those costs are getting, we get paid more and more. Those tend to be scenarios where we're paid over a longer period of time. So there's a greater upside. So we're essentially call it a bit of a business partner with some of our clients. We pick those very carefully because obviously we can certainly control how fantastic our packaging is, but we can't control their sales forces or their product quality. So there has to be a high level of trust. I hope that answers your question there. Here's another question from Bob. Said, how many design options should I ask for? I want to be budget conscious, but also I'm afraid of doing enough exploration to make sure I get what I need. So according to Nielsen data, the average number of designs that agencies or designers present is 3. So I would say that's an absolute minimum. Like I said just a little bit earlier, we typically share somewhere between 3 and 5 designs to start with. We have done more, but that tends to be larger corporations. I think if you get somewhere between 3 to 4 designs and you've done a really good job of developing strict guardrails in that creative brief process, you're going to have 3 to 4 designs you love. The importance of doing that creative brief and having a lot of discussions up front and being involved in those conversations with key stakeholders is to make sure that you don't set a designer or a design firm free to go do work without them knowing what those guardrails are, so they don't come back and surprise you with things that you're not going to be happy with. That's a bad feeling for everybody involved. Sue just asked, how do you balance what has to go on a label for TTB versus telling a brand story? So there's definitely some tricks of the trade, submitting your back labels as your front labels so that you can kind of move some information around. Also, really making sure that there's a number of ways that you can kind of talk about your product on the front and still make sure you're TTB compliant. I mean, obviously you're going to have your statements of contents. You're going to have your alcohol and your volume and kind of some of the things that you'd expect to find there. But I would never let those sorts of things drive the design. One of the weirdest trends I've seen in recent years has been these brand designs where the product name type is the largest thing. So you see this gigantic gin or gigantic vodka. It's almost kind of a generic kind of driven approach. I don't understand it. I don't think there's anything unique about saying that you're a vodka or a gin. So I think that's a great example of like what not to do. We always strive to make sure that your packaging is going to tell your brand story and let that come through. Here's another question. For smaller family brands with less money to spend, how do you convince them that a redesign is worth the investment? Well, we've got some great case studies and we've got some great clients, and a lot of them are, so one of our favorite things to do is work with startups. We work with the largest distilleries and wineries on earth as well, but I love the entrepreneur spirit of craft spirits. I always have. I'm an entrepreneur, small business person. It keeps me from, I guess, starting more businesses. And one of the things we do is really, we pour our hearts into, we don't have a CF Napa Light. And so one of the things that we do is we have kind of different staggered pricing with different sorts of deliverables for smaller clients. We also have them just speak with our past clients, people that are in exactly the same terror point that they're at, where they're really nervous about spending money that they work so hard to earn, and they've got to make sure it works for them. So having them talk with them and just, I tell them, call any of our clients and ask what their experience was, get the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. The other thing is really kind of talking through some of the things we've been talking about today about how it's so important, and this really should be part of their business plan from the very get-go. We're to the point now where we're actually speaking to a lot of clients before they even go and buy a still and a physical location. And I'm really trying to convince people that they should be more of a marketing driven company to start with. There is so many producers out there that can produce your exact recipe. You can work with them without having to invest in a still and a physical location, and the incredible amount of time that that's probably going to take for you to get set up with all the zoning and legalities. So you could strip that 3 years of nightmare away, go produce your product, put money into the marketing and design, get it off and running. And then when you're killing it, go buy the still of your dreams if you want, or take the time while you're making money to go develop your physical location. So flipping some of this a little bit on its head, I know it sounds a little bit self-serving, but it's going to save you a hell of a lot of money in the long run, and it gets you to cash flow faster. So I'll let you think about that a little bit. What are some of the mistakes a client makes, that doesn't set the process up for success? Listen, all entrepreneurs are busy people, and they're often super distracted by a lot of tertiary things that are going on. So not focusing on the process enough, particularly up front in that creative brief process, not investing in that package design or the process enough. And I think one of the bigger ones we see is not making sure that all the key stakeholders are involved in those first meetings. So someone sometimes gets delegated on their team to run the kind of the brand design, and they don't bring in all the key decision makers until once the design's done. Or even worse, we just had this happen recently. We're a much larger company where they had an international key stakeholder who they didn't bring to the table until we were completely done with the project, and it just got blown up. So you can do all the right things, and you can ask all the right questions, and you can make sure that all the key stakeholders are there, and sometimes they still surprise you. How large of a team is the ideal in the creative process, and how many is too many? That's a great question. So I tend to think there's certainly plenty of freelance designers that do a great job. And if you're super confident, or you have a working relationship with them, it might be enough. I think at least 2 designers, so you have at least 2 perspectives, is advisable. We have a team of 3 to 4. We tend to put our entire team of designers on every single project and use it as kind of an internal competition. So think of it as internally, they're all sketching, they're all working in designs. We do big critiques together, and then culls down to the designs we take onto the computer. Those further get critiqued and culled to ultimately becomes those 3 to 4 that we present. So we might start with like 10 designs from 4 different designers and cull down to the 3 to 4 you ultimately see. That might be many from one designer, it might be a few from each. But you get that variety and different style and perspective and thinking that I think is so important. And one of the reasons why I think agencies are a huge opportunity for craft spirits, because they can get so many different ideas so quickly all in one spot. Another question was, what were your thoughts on label refreshing, and when should a brand consider that? Well, the reality is most clients come to us when things aren't going that great, right? They know they've got a problem. They've got a retailer that said, listen, we love your product, but we don't like the packaging. And that happens a lot. We even have had that with wine, where somms are not interested in a brand because they're like, listen, I can't go present this to a table at $70. It looks like it's worth $6. So even now, those key gatekeepers are actually concerned about the packaging long before anything where the consumer interacts with it. So that's an obvious one, right? But actually, the best time to redesign can be when things are really starting to click. So we tend to tell people that when you really are starting to expand your distribution, so maybe you've gone from your local market to like a tri-state, that might be a great time to kind of button up things and just polish things a little bit. Make sure you're ready for that continued expansion. Think it's a great time to signal that things are changing and that things are growing, and maybe a time to talk about how you're going to add additional products into the future. So I see we're nearly out of time here. So I'm just going to go back here quickly and say a quick thank you. So this is, if you want any additional information from me, by all means, if you have additional questions, if I didn't get to you, there were so many, give us a call. You can email me anytime at info@cfnapa.com. It'll go directly to me. And then a big thank you to WSWA for having me and for hosting this event. If you need any additional information, here's some things for you. We'll be following up with a follow-up email and some additional articles from CF Napa. Thank you and have a great day.